The CEO of silver producer First Majestic is preparing to join a class action lawsuit against bullion banks for price rigging. Joining us on the line to talk about this is Keith Neumeyer of First Majestic. Keith, good to have you back on the show.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity, Daniela, and it's a nice start to the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've really become the face of this movement amongst the silver producers, Keith. You've been very vocal on the topic, speaking, not just this year, but since I've known you, you've spoken out against the CFTC and banks. So what part are you looking to play now?
Well, I think very much the same role as I think I've been, playing, if you want to put it that way, for the last, several years. You're right, I have been a spokesman, and it has been disappointing to me that other, mining executives have not joined the fight. And, in my conversations with the lawyers in New York who are involved in getting this case classified as a class action lawsuit, they actually told me in that conversation that we were the first producer to ever contact them, which was pretty surprising to me. And the miners, they tend to be quite conservative, and they seem to be afraid to take a position. But I'm not like that. I just think that it's our duty as directors of these mining companies, these public companies, to face up to this manipulation and support our investors and shareholders.
Have you personally reached out to the other silver producers, asking them to kind of join this?
On multiple occasions over the last couple of years. And it's surprising, the fact that even just recently I've received emails from a couple of them that have said, quite frankly, no, we will not participate.
So, like you said, the mining industry is conservative. So do you think they're just afraid of perhaps upsetting shareholders, or what do you think's behind it?
I can't speak for them. My history is different than most of the other people that are running these mining companies. I'm not a geologist. I'm not an engineer. I'm a finance guy. I came from the banks. I worked for the banks in the 80s, and I think differently than I guess most of these executives. And I guess that's why, I view this as such an important battle. And these other executives, they're in most cases they're either geologists or engineers, and they're very much focused on mining and what they're taking out of the ground, and not so much of the product that they're actually selling. And it is confusing to me. I can't speak for them, as I said, but it would be nice if they listened to this piece and maybe send me an email or put a call into me, and we could work together on this, because I think it's critical.
So Deutsche Bank was recently, had to pay, 38 million to settle the case. Does that give you hope that this fight could be won?
Well, absolutely. I think that has elevated it to a large degree. And, one of the senior executives at another mining company, a silver producer, said, I wonder what they're doing in the gold space. And my reply to him was, they're doing exactly the same in the gold space as they're doing in the silver space. The silver space is even that much smaller and much more easily manipulated, and they have a lot of fun doing it. But the same actions taking place in the gold space. And I was actually quite surprised that individual had even, asked me that question, what's going on in the gold space, because, we've known for years now that this manipulation has been going on. Now, finally, we've got a bank that's come to the table with all this evidence. And, apparently there's some odd 35,000 email communications that have been forwarded, and some have come public already. I'm sure many of your listeners have read some of the stuff that's been going back and forth between the different banks when they're smashing down, these metals, when it hit certain prices and prior to the fix and so on and so forth. So the evidence is very clear, and I think it's given this whole fight one, more piece of ammunition at least, to actually potentially win this thing. And the 38 million is sitting there. But there should be a lot more money coming from the other banks that are even much more guilty than Deutsche Bank. Deutsche is actually a relatively small player in the whole mix of things.
Well, Keith, finally, what do you say to critics who argue that, look, there isn't manipulation, and you're just talking up your book, basically? It would be in your best interest, I guess, if silver prices were manipulated. What's your response to that?
Well, going back, 30, 40 years, look, I came from the floor of the stock exchange in the 80s. So I've got firsthand experience on how markets work, which is quite unique. I think most people don't have the same experience that I have. So, I speak from a very educated point of view. And, the metal prices, you go back and over the last 10 years, you can't say to me for a second that the supply demand fundamentals of silver has changed that dramatically over the last 10 years. I can tell you that mine supply is dropping, and I can tell you that consumption is going up, yet the price is going the other way. And why is that? Because it's not in the best interest of the banks to allow the metals to move higher, because they have huge short positions on them, and it's in their best interest to keep them down. So I wish that didn't happen. I wish that we did have a free market. I received an email yesterday from a shareholder of First Majestic saying that he looked at how many contracts on COMEX traded in silver, and he did the calculation. It worked out to 101 years of silver production traded in 2016. Now, how can that happen? There's no regulation. Right. The banks can just simply continually write paper contracts with no one monitoring them, no metal to back them up. And as long as you have a system like that is not backed up by actual physical commodity, it's prone to manipulation. And we've suspected it for years now with a lot of the work that GAD has been doing and others. But now there's clear evidence that it is actually happening. So I just don't see that the other side of the argument, it really has any valid argument that the manipulation doesn't happen. And as an executive of one of the more prominent silver companies in the world, I think that it's my responsibility to support our shareholders, our investors, and also don't forget the communities that we're active in. There's about 30,000 people in Mexico that rely on our operations, and the amount of layoffs that we've had to do over the last 5 years as a result of the silver price going from $50 to current metal prices also has been devastating to many of the communities that we're active in. So it's not just this electronic number that's flashing on computer screens in New York or London. It's actually affecting real people in a very negative way, and I take that extremely seriously, and that's why I'm speaking out.
Right. Keith, thank you so much for joining us on the line today. Best of luck.
Okay, thanks, Daniela.
And thank you for watching this edition of Kitco's Gold Report. We'll see you tomorrow.